50% of women don't apply for raises because of perimenopause symptoms. 25% think about quitting their jobs. 10% do quit their jobs. And then it also shows that women often go to doctors, and when they are not given the appropriate treatments from those doctors, they are more likely to then quit their jobs.
This is Educating to be Human, and I'm your host, Lisa Petrides, founder of the Institute for the Study of Knowledge Management in Education. In each episode, I sit down with ordinary people creating extraordinary impact, people who are challenging notions of how we learn, why we learn, and who controls what we learn. Thank you very much for listening. Thank you for joining us today on Educating to be Human. In this episode, I speak with Joanna Strober, entrepreneur and founder of Midi Health, a virtual clinic providing expert, personalized, insurance-covered care for women navigating perimenopause and menopause. The stage of life for women remains one of the most under-researched, underfunded, and underserved areas in medicine, and the lack of conversation and education around it has shaped how and whether or not women even have access to care and information. So, Joanna, thank you so much for being here. As a longtime entrepreneur and pragmatic problem solver, your latest venture really addresses this deep gap in women's health by bringing much needed information and support to an issue that's often discounted or simply overlooked. And I think that the current success of Midi Health is a powerful reminder that we need new models of healthcare, ones that not only provide care, but also empower women with the education they need to understand and thrive in their changing bodies. So to begin, menopause and midlife women's health have been historically neglected in medical research and in medical funding. And in your view, why has this gap in care and knowledge persisted for so long?
I know it's a good question. The reality is that people didn't think that women needed special care. Till the 1990s, they didn't even include women in a lot of research. They only included men. And so just historically, women's health has been underinvested in and under-resourced. I suppose, I'm sure there's a lot of historical reasons for that, but it's become a bit of a reality that women's healthcare is an afterthought.
Would you say historically, who has controlled the conversation around women's health, and what impact has that had on what we know about our own bodies and our options?
Well, most of the research went to men who were researching things about their healthcare or were doing research projects and things they were particularly interested in. There was one big study, however, there was the Women's Health Initiative, which was a very, very well-funded, large initiative on women's health. And unfortunately for women, actually, the women and men doing that study got it wrong. So, finally, we had a really big research project, and it was misinterpreted. So it's not just men, but women too, who have, given somewhat of women's health short shift.
I'm curious, do you want to say a little bit more about what they got wrong?
So essentially what happened is that they stopped the study. They said, estrogen causes cancer. And they stopped the study. The study was of older women, and they were trying to see the connection about heart disease for people who started taking estrogen over 65. And they realized that, there was a very small increase of some diseases, and they stopped, and they really basically got the story wrong. It actually turned out that now that we look at that data 25 years later, that women taking estrogen alone actually had a 30% decrease in breast cancer, not an increase in breast cancer, that the issues were related to progesterone, that those were, it was a different kind of progesterone than we take now. So there hasn't been a lot of research on women's health, and unfortunately, this one big study got it wrong. And so that is actually part of the pain of all of this, is we don't have very much study and we don't have the right information.
And I think that part of what you're doing is really challenging this idea that menopause is something that women just have to get through in silence, right? So how is Midi and how are you helping shift what is seen as worth treating and worth researching, essentially?
Well, honestly, the good news is that women are starting to demand better care. The things don't change on their own, right? Things are changing because women are getting to be in their 40s and 50s and they're saying, actually, this care is not acceptable for me. I deserve better. And they now have jobs and they have money and they're demanding better care. And it's really that demand by them that's making a difference. They're also saying to research labs that they should be putting money into this, and they're funding companies that should help women's health. But it is women demanding it and asking for it that's making the difference.
So, I guess, what are some of the biggest barriers that you've seen for women trying to access accurate and personalized information? Is it just that it's not there, or that they're getting the incorrect information from their medical practitioners, as you alluded to from those studies?
Well, I mean, for the past 30 years, we haven't been doing any research on women's estrogen levels because we just stopped doing that research. And so we don't have the information, and doctors haven't been trained on this in medical school. Nurses haven't been trained on this in medical school. The people who do know it then also go into concierge medicine, so they can rightfully charge a lot of money, which is fine, but it just means that most women don't have access to this education and to this knowledge, and most doctors haven't been trained on it.
Well, and this is kind of an obvious question, but when women don't have access to real information about their health, when it's missing from the training the doctors are getting, if it's not covered by our insurance policies, or if public conversations aren't happening, what's at stake? What do we lose?
Well, women don't feel good. I don't know what.
There you go. There you go. It can't be any simpler than that. Women don't feel good. I love that. Well, and there's still so much stigma about talking about menopause openly, and it's so important to break that silence. And of course, for me as an educator, I think a lot about what role could education bring, both informal and informal. What role could education play in that, in breaking that stigma?
There's a few components to the education that are actually really important. There was a Harvard Business School study that looked at women in the workplace who were experiencing menopausal symptoms. And what they saw is that when women started having hot flashes or brain fog at work, they were seen as less important leaders. And they were taken less seriously in their organization by both the men and the women in their organization. But when the women called it out and said, oh, that was brain fog and I'm getting treated for it, they regained their power. So I think that it's really important that we have this conversation and it doesn't stay silent, that it's an open conversation, that we say these are the symptoms and treatments are available. It is not a sign of dementia. It is not a sign of weakness. It's just a physical symptom that we can treat. And if you educate people to understand that it's just a physical symptom that they can treat, then it can be treated like any other health issue and not derail you at work. And that is actually what the study showed. So understanding that you are having these symptoms, understanding that they probably are having an impact on you, but acknowledge them, calling them out, and getting treated for them can make a really big impact.
Just a quick story. I remember it was about 10 years ago. I was a bit perimenopausal myself, and I was in a meeting, and everybody was in there in a board meeting with their suits on. And all of a sudden, this woman who was leading the meeting kind of paused, or sort of flubbed her words. And then she goes, it's hot in here. And she whips off her jacket and has this tank top on, and she's sweating, and all the women in the room are just laughing. And it broke the silence, it broke this barrier for a minute, and everybody just got more comfortable with it. So that's just a little anecdote of what I think you're talking much more about the research piece of it and what that means. But seeing that firsthand was actually very powerful for me. To, see a woman just, rip off her jacket in a business meeting and say, it's hot in here.
Yeah. Right. Just call it out. Yeah. I think that, we have to know that's what's going on, though. So the research shows that actually 50% of women don't apply for raises because of perimenopause symptoms. 25% think about quitting their jobs. 10% do quit their jobs. And then it also shows that women often go to doctors, and when they are not given the appropriate treatments from those doctors, they are more likely to then quit their jobs. If you get the wrong care, or you're told by a doctor, this is just normal aging, deal with it, those women are more likely to leave their jobs. So it's really important that women get the right treatments.
Those are some phenomenal statistics. Could you just repeat those again? I want everybody to make sure they've heard those.
Yeah, 50% of women don't apply for a raise or promotion because of menopause symptoms. 25% of women think about leaving their jobs because of them, and 10% actually do leave their jobs because of perimenopause and menopause symptoms.
Incredible. Thank you for that research, right? We need to know those things. Well, I'm curious, looking ahead, what changes do you hope to see both in how the medical knowledge about menopause is created and then how it's shared with the people who need it the most?
It's a hard thing to argue that a lot of time in medical school will ever be spent on this. Theoretically, we would like all doctors to be trained on how to manage these type of symptoms. The truth is, it's probably not going to happen. And the reality is, there's a lot to teach in medical school, and you have a lot to teach doctors. I think I go at it from a different perspective. I think women need to demand better care, and I think the market has to solve it for them. I mean, in general, markets evolve when there is a need and there's someone to pay for the service. And I've come to believe that we can't count on medical schools teaching this. We can't count on the government doing this. Like, it's going to be market forces that actually solve this, because women are going to say, I deserve better care, and they're going to look for it, and there'll be companies like mine, Midi Health, that will emerge to solve that gap. I don't think it's realistic to think that it's going to be solved any other way.
When you think about the women who come to Midi, what do their experiences tell you about what's not working and in how we talk about it and treat women's health at midlife? And then what do they get when they come to Midi in that way? So what do their experiences tell us when they walk in? What are you learning? You're probably learning a lot about how we are traditionally teaching and talking about it, right? From these women that come in.
So mostly in our system, we have a sick care system, right? And if you have a broken bone, we do a great job at healing your broken bone. And if you have cancer, we actually do a great job in this country of taking care of cancer. What we don't do as good of a job at is people who say they are not feeling good or they're not feeling right and you don't have a diagnosis. And for those women, they're usually just told, you're fine. It's just fine. It's a normal sign of aging. You're fine. And, I joke all the time that, like, when your eyesight goes, they don't say, okay, you're fine, right? They give you glasses. I think that historically, we have just been dismissed as, those things. They don't create a surgery. They're willing to do a hysterectomy. You make a lot of money on a hysterectomy. You don't make a lot of money treating hot flashes. And so the time is not allocated there. And what women need is people who are trained in their symptoms and have the time to talk to them to help them to feel better. That is the issue that needs to happen. And what we believe is actually that telehealth is actually the perfect solution for this, because you don't have to go drive to a doctor's office. You don't have to take off your clothes. You don't have to sit there on a table. You don't have to have all the other things that go and get weighed and have your blood pressure done, all that stuff, right? We can just give you time on telehealth, right, to have that conversation with you, to understand your physical symptoms and to take care of them. It's a gift, actually, to women to be able to, and what they tell us every day is, someone listened to me, they cared about me, they took care of me, they listened to my symptoms, they took them seriously. And so a lot of what we're doing is giving them the gift of time and the gift of someone who understands and takes them seriously. And then we have trained all of our providers to understand women's bodies and understand what are the solutions that women can try. And one of the biggest things is this is a very iterative process. It is not a one size fits all. It's often try one thing, try another thing until you start feeling better. And our providers are trained to do that. It's a different kind of care than our current medical system is equipped to provide.
Right, because in traditional healthcare, that flow of knowledge or knowing stays with that specialist or physician. And I'd love to hear more a bit, because I know that you work and in, I think, many ways empower nurse practitioners to do that work and to help change that. I'd love to hear some more about that.
Yeah, so we train nurse practitioners to offer this care. I mean, I think nurse practitioners are amazing at providing care, quite honestly. They are trained to listen. They are trained to relate to patients. So they are the perfect people who should and can be providing this care. So we have experts in all aspects of women's health who train the nurse practitioners to offer the care, and then they are able to then offer it. So we have physician supervisors and we have physician trainers, and then all the care is actually delivered by the nurse practitioners.
So I'm curious how the nurse practitioners come to you, right? So they're probably out in the field already. Why do the nurse practitioners come to you? Like what is it that, as you're recruiting them, what are they seeing differently or doing differently, or how does this change their experience in their profession?
Well, we take them very seriously. We think they're fundamental to offering good care to women. And so our job is to offer them really good jobs. And it's also to offer them flexible jobs so we can give them some flexibility, but also we treat them, like professionals, and they don't always get that in other parts of their work life.
Are you able to also be doing some of your own, I don't know if we want to call it research, but information gathering because of the work that you do?
We are. We are going to have the biggest repository of, information on midlife women and their care concerns. And so our goal is to, eventually do more research based on that data.
Do you have any even sort of anecdotal findings that you've seen thus far?
I mean, a lot of what we're seeing is that we save the system a lot of money. The average woman, when they go to a PCP, to their primary care doctor, is 25% of them are referred to a specialist. But with us, only 3% are referred to a specialist because we're able to take care of so many other things. And then, when we think, for example, about UTIs, a lot of women go on antibiotics to take care of them, but all you need is vaginal estrogen. And so we're able to prevent UTIs, and we're seeing that. We're seeing that we're preventing emergency room visits because we know when someone needs to go to the emergency room and when they don't. So we are seeing that we're significantly reducing healthcare costs by using Midi rather than going and relying on the traditional healthcare system.
Can you say a little bit more? I mean, people understand telemedicine, right? Since COVID, we've all experienced it in some way, but it seems that you have really built a model of care on this, and it would be really interesting for folks to hear about that.
What we realized is that we should offer insurance-covered healthcare using the internet and telehealth, and that hadn't really been done before. Mostly it was cash pay and with subscription models, and so we decided not to follow a subscription model. We decided to offer insurance-covered care to women. So that was really our big differentiator.
What drew you to women's health? I mean, I know you've been involved in other health-related startups, but what drew you personally to this and to create this platform focused specifically on this stage of life for women?
I really believe, women's healthcare is, particularly midlife women, is one of the biggest gaps in medical care. So there's just not been enough resources allocated to it. And it's such a under-offered area of medicine. And so it's an exciting place to be because women have been so historically underserved by the medical system.
And what are some of the stories that you've heard so far from women? Like what are when you're talking about its success today thus far, what are you hearing?
I will read some to you. I think that's better than me saying.
Excellent. Yes, of course.
So I liked this one that came in the other day. I want you to know that I just enjoyed sex with my husband for the first time in 5 years. I cannot tell you how appreciative I am for your saving my marriage and my mental well-being. That came in this morning.
Love that.
But I get these all day. It's actually, it's really the most fun part of my job is getting all of these testimonials of people saying how much of an impact. Here we go. This morning I saw a patient who was bouncing up and down with excitement and said, I finally feel like an actual human being again and not just a slave to my menopause symptoms. Here's another one. Direct quote. The seething rage monster is back in the box. She says, thank you. Here's another. It's been life-changing. It's helped all of my symptoms. I feel normal again. Here we go. This woman, when she came to me, could not even take a shower by herself because of extreme fatigue, lightheaded, and sadness that she'd been dealing with for 6 years. She thanked me that she can now take a shower and is feeling much better. These come in, I mean, they literally come in all day long. One woman said that in the last 50 years of life, this is honestly the best care she has ever received as a woman. Oh, this one just came in. God bless Midi and everyone who works there. I say this now every single day. I've been sleeping for the first time in years.
Thank you so much for sharing those. They're remarkable. And, in some ways, what you've done is so simple. You've listened to the voices of women, you've done the training, you provide it, you listen, right? That's not like what we think of when we think of advanced healthcare and all of the interventions and medicines and tests that we need. And I just think really remarkable is I'll say that word again. When I think about how you're providing access to knowledge that has formerly not even been part of what women have had access to. And I also think it's so important to see, we're talking about bodies, right? So we're talking about the embodied experience of women, and you're really showing and bringing out how we learn and know from our bodies and how absolutely, essential that is.
Yeah.
And how your work is really accelerating that. So kudos to you. I would love to any kind of final comments that you would like to share with us.
No, I think, your podcast is about education. And what's really important is that women need to educate themselves. They need to know that they have these symptoms. They need to know that most women in their 40s or 30s are going to have menopause symptoms, that all women go through menopause. Everyone. We don't all have babies, but we do all go through menopause. If you are feeling off, you should not accept the status quo, and you should demand getting better care. And I feel like what I was saying to you earlier, that, we finally have care because women are demanding it. They're saying this is not okay. And I think it's really important that women start saying that. And if you're not feeling right, if things are changing, doesn't matter if someone says to you, you're not in perimenopause yet. You are. Peri just means pre. You can get fixed. You don't have to say, okay, I'll wait until I feel really terrible and then get care. That is what I suggest, whether it's coming to Midi Health or someplace else. If you're not feeling right, make sure that you get taken care of and that you get the right medication.
Joanna, thank you so much for your time. Your work is helping women feel seen, heard, and whole again, not just through compassion, but through an innovative model that reimagines what accessible, expert care can look like. It's not just health care, it's human care, and it's long overdue. Thank you, Joanna. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the show this week. This has been Lisa Petrides with Educating to be Human. If you enjoy our show, please rate and review us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can access our show notes for links and information on our guests, and don't forget to follow us on Instagram, Blue Sky, at edu2behuman. That is EDU to be human. This podcast was created by Lisa Petrides and produced by Eleni Theros. Educating to be Human is recorded by Nathan Sherman and edited by Ty Mayer, with music by Orestes Kaletsos.